All right, this is I guess a part two, an addition to the video I did about the prophecy in Daniel and Revelation. And I never really got to get into Revelation 18 because I got ready and went out to eat and whatnot. So I'm gonna get into that now, and I'm gonna get into the seven kings, the five that have fallen. One is to continue for a short time, and then there's an eighth who was of the seven, right? And yeah, we're also going to get into the deadly head wound as well. Add more detail. All of this is pointing to the Roman Catholic Church. It's the Pope who sits in the temple of God among the people of God who are the temple of God, claiming to be God and committing great blasphemies. He's been here all along, and the whole world's deceived, thinking we're waiting for the Antichrist, and the Pope is just, some figurehead for a religion that just isn't right. It's not true. Christians, they can look at Islam and be like, yeah, it's a false religion or whatever. And they may think, oh, the Antichrist is going to come out of there. Uh, but the Jews, they don't accept Jesus. The Antichrist is going to be a Jew, and he's going to come up, and the Jews are going to follow him and whatnot. And the Catholics, yeah, they're just whatever. They're just false. They got things wrong. What? That's it? It's like they've been manipulated and blinded to be able to see what's right in front of their face. It's been there all along. And Jesus says, or I should say, just God in general says, because I don't know if it's the Father, Jesus, or both of them speaking, when they say, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. There's no knowledge of God, and they've forgotten his law. And because of such, he's going to forget them and their children. They're not going to be priests unto him. So anyway, slightly getting off track there. So let's get into this. Let's get into Revelation 18, and then we're going to jump into some details on the other things that are not actually tied into Revelation 18. But anyway, Revelation 18, verse 1, it says, and after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and become the habitation of devils, and every hold of every foul spirit, and cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Now, you may be asking yourself, how have the merchants of the earth waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies? Because I'm sure you can think of, yeah, all nations have drunk of the wine, which is the doctrine of the Catholic Church, and the kings of the earth all go and kiss the ring of the Pope, so they committed fornication with her and made deals with her. But the merchants, how are they getting rich? Well, that's where you need to know the law. You see, places like England, Canada, the United States for America, Australia, India, and a few other places have common law, Christian law, as the highest law of the land. But we obey Roman law, which is the law of the sea, also known as the law of commerce. You see, you have the right, the God-given right, to travel in your automobile. But it is a privilege to drive your vehicle. You don't know the law, so you don't know the difference of those two sentences. You see, If you are driving, you are doing commerce. If you're using a vehicle, you are doing commerce, which puts you under the jurisdiction of Roman law, where they can fine you and ticket you and even imprison you for breaking their law because you admit that you are driving a vehicle. And that's why the police officer asks for your driver's license, because he has to prove jurisdiction. And if you have a driver's license, you're admitting that you're driving because you had to ask permission to do commerce. If you're just traveling, you don't need one of those. The cops have no jurisdiction over you. But you don't know this because you're ignorant of the law. And because of your lack of knowledge, you're going towards destruction. And that's why you ask for your registration. Why? Because when you register a vehicle, and you register as a vehicle, that's what you're doing. It's not an automobile anymore. It's a vehicle. So the police officer now knows that he has jurisdiction over the vehicle that you're in, because when you register it, you give it over to the state and you have the right to use it. The state owns it. That's why if it's stolen, the police will try to get it back to give to you because you are the one that has the right to use it. But if it's your automobile, it's your responsibility to find out who stole it and go get it. The police and the state aren't going to do anything about it. That's your problem. So that's why you register it, so that the state owns it and gives you the right to use it. You don't know this stuff. So all this stuff that has to do with maritime law and all these trading agreements and all this stuff have to do with Roman law, which ties to Papal Rome. And they are waxing rich from it. On top of this, the Vatican actually owns the City of London, which is a separate entity from England. More things you should probably know. And through there, they own the corporation known as Washington, D.C., which is its own little city that's separated from the United States for America. It's its own little country state, or country city, city-state, whatever you want to call it. And through that, and the Federal Reserve using Federal Reserve notes, this merchandise goes through. This commerce is able to go through. Their merchants are able to sell and buy and sell, or whatever. And they're able to tax because you're also using their money. You're not using your own, you're not using silver or gold, you're using their notes, which again puts you under their jurisdiction. Render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. So anyway, there's something else I was going to add to that. It seemed to have slipped my mind there. So the Vatican was able to run things through London and the Washington, D.C. and the Federal Reserve with the notes. And also through the bar system, they're able to run the law. And yada, yada, yada. And that's why you see in the courts that the American flag has a gold fringe around it, because that is showing you that it's, what is it called? Martial law, and that it is run by maritime law. And that's why criminals can get away with stupid shit, and that you can get in trouble for something stupid. Criminals get away with murder, stealing, and doing all this stuff, and all these businesses can get away with it, but you will get in trouble for some petty thing where there's no real victim. But anyway, something you need to really understand while reading this, because if you don't know this stuff doesn't make any sense, especially when you try to point it to the Catholic Church. You can tell, okay, Babylon, and she's a harlot, so she was a church that committed fornication and broke the covenant with God. So you can point that out, but then you're like, about this merchandise? Doesn't make sense. But now, hopefully, it does. So anyway, verse 4 says, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. Because this is coming soon," and I'll explain that as I go through this video. It is so very soon that it can be at any time, and I'll explain. You'll get what I'm saying. But yeah, just because you're Catholic is not condemning you. We've all been fooled. I've been fooled. We've all partaken of stupid shit. Believed politicians and their bullshit. You know, had one priest or pastor telling us one thing, and then a new one comes in is telling the opposite. You know, this thing's gonna send you to hell, but no, 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 that thing's actually fine. You know, vice versa. You know, we fall for stuff. We need to humble ourselves, and admit we've been wrong, even if we've been following it our whole lives. We need to humble ourselves and be like, okay, well, it's better to change late than never change at all. You know, it's like a movie that popped in my head that I seen as a little kid, The Land Before Time, where all these little baby dinosaurs are trying to find this like promised land. And there's a little dinosaur named Sarah who's too stubborn to admit she's wrong, and she goes the wrong way and she gets herself into trouble and almost dies because she's too prideful to admit she's wrong and she's stubborn. And that's how a lot of Catholics are. But God loves you and he's pleading with you, hey, I'm going to drop some plagues on this harlot. Come out of her, because I don't want them to be poured out on you. Stop being stubborn. If you be stubborn, they're going to be coming out on you. So, wake up. This is not saying, oh, I'm smarter than you or I'm better than you. It's no, I give a shit about you and I'm trying to fucking help you. So, hey, smarten up. Anyway, verse 5. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her according to her works, in the cup which she hath filled to her double. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her, for she hath in her heart, I sit a queen, saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And I've been saying this, trying to wake Catholics up about, look at Jesus. Look at him. The creator and ruler of everything. He comes to us. How? As a jobless homeless man that serves everybody. The Pope, claiming to be the vicar of Christ, God on earth, wants you to give all your money to him. And he lives fancifully in decked out cathedrals with all kinds of amazing artwork, fancy robes and golden chalices and golden crucifix and all these wonderful things. Yet he'll go to Africa and walk among these poor starving people and be like, I'm gracing you with my presence. And when it's time to help the poor, do they give of the money that they've built up? All those tithes and offering they received, which are supposed to be used to help out the whole body of church, they hoard them for themselves, and they will do a raffle, a food drive, a bake sale, some bingo, and get you to give what food you have, what money you have, what time you have to help out the poor. That's what they'll do. They'll do all that stuff to get the money to help out the poor, but they're not going to give the money they received. No, that's for them. And you're going to be saying the Protestants do it too. Yes, you heard that she's the mother of harlots. She's a harlot that's a mother of harlots. These Protestants that come out of her are just as much harlots as she is. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off, for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. That great mighty city is Vatican City. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. Now pay attention to what's being bought up here. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all fine wood, all manner of vessels of ivory and all manner of vessels of most precious wood, of brass and iron and marble and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. Now this part is where it's going to get interesting with the slaves and souls of men. All of this stuff the Vatican buys up because they're decked in purple and scarlet and their fine clothes. You see them, they're all decked in those things. They got to wash them and clean them and repair them and get new ones. And all the precious artifacts they make out of the gold, silver, and iron, and marble, and all the giant cathedrals. And they like to burn their incense, so they got their cinnamon and ointments and frankincense. And you know about the wine and oil and the flour and everything, making the Eucharist wafer thing and doing their wine. They need a lot of that. They need to buy up a lot. And as I mentioned, the Vatican owns London and Washington, D.C., so buying up the horses and chariots and slaves, and the souls of men, they're doing that too. They're the ones directing the military. That's why we're always doing these crusades against the Muslims. Not defending Muslims, just saying what's going on. But anyway, slaves and souls of men. You are bound yourself as a slave by becoming a U.S. citizen. You're no longer a free man or woman. You're not a free American. You're a citizen. A citizen is what the Romans would call their slaves. They're citizens. You're a slave. And the souls of men? The Vatican claims to own the souls of everyone on earth. And they claim this, and they also have records when you're born, your birth certificate, and what they would do, I'm not sure if they still do it, it's one of those things they don't really show you anymore, but they would prick the sole of the baby's foot, because it's the sole. Then they take the blood from there, and they mix it with ink, and they stamp that onto like a birth certificate kind of thing there. And then they claim that with your blood, that they own you, they own your soul, and they make that little document. And they do other such things where you're binding yourself with your contract with your social security number and ID and driver's license and all this stuff. You're binding yourself. That's why a lot of places the ID is for 7 years. After 7 years you set the slave free, and then if the slave wants to be a slave again, they'll re-up themselves. Something in the Old Testament there you can look up. But anyway, it says here, and the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city, which with clothes and fine linen, and purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster and all the company's ships and sailors, as many as trade by sea, stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness, for in 1 hour is she made desolate. And this is Vatican City, with all the goods that they come in, decked in scarlet and purple and gold up the wazoo. So fancy. They have all of this. And Roman law is maritime law, admiralty law, it's law of the sea to do the commerce. That's why all these people who have ships, they're under that law. They're weeping because they're getting rich off of this, off of her. Well, let's read this, and then I'm going to get into some really interesting stuff. It says here, "Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall the great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians, and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. And no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more in thee. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee. And the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived, and in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints, and of all that were slain upon the earth." Now, sorceries, you can think of, Jedi mind tricks, getting everybody to believe their bullshit doctrines. We can look up here, it's pharmakia, where we get pharmacy and stuff. The use of medicine and drugs. And you should look up that connection, and to see the whole world's being deceived right now, trying to unite the whole world and showing their great power by getting everybody to do mass mandates and social distance and shut down their businesses over an imaginary illness that, even if it is real, you have a 0.002% chance of actually dying from it. It's less deadly than the flu. And they're getting everybody to take their sorceries with their vaccines that have not been used on people before. An mRNA vaccine has not been used on anybody before. And now, because I said that, this video is probably going to be flagged, and it sucks that some people won't see it when it's on YouTube, but I also put this stuff up on Rumble, so check me out at some guy JD on Rumble, and on YouTube I'm using Jesus Gives You Balls, because he does. But anyway, now let's get into some interesting things about what I got into the other video and I didn't get into the detail of. One is the deadly wound. When did this deadly wound happen? Well, if you remember that there was a prophecy of a time and a half a time. Times, and dividing of times, also said as something like 40 in 2 months. There's 30 days in a month and 1,260 days, a day for a year. Well, when you look at that, it's interesting. This great tribulation period we have in 1790. No, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. In 538 AD, like I got into in the last video, the papacy was established, 538, because they came about through 10 kings that were around. I might actually still have that up here somewhere. Yes, these 10 kingdoms came up after the Roman Empire fell, and the Pope came up from these 10 kings, and they destroyed the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths, and they established themselves in 538 AD. This started that period of time where the church had to go into the wilderness. This is where the Antichrist stood up and started to claim to be Christ on earth, claiming to be God, speaking great blasphemies, changing times and laws, which I went into in the last video. And this period ended in 1798. So let me close this. Napoleon in 1798, Pope captured and taken from Rome. We'll look more into that. And I was in prison for like 5 years or so. So Napoleon was considered like a ruler of a strong army and military force, and he waged war against the papacy. Just went in there, marched in there, and arrested the Pope. Right? But what ends up happening? The Pope gets reinstated. And what does the Bible say when the deadly wound is healed? They wandered after the beast and said, "Who can make war with the beast?" And exactly, if Napoleon can go in there and take down the Pope, and the Pope is just going to be reestablished 5 years later, that deadly wound healed because it's the head of the beast, right? It's the beast. It's not a man who got shot in the head or something. No, the beast had its head removed. Its head was wounded. The head of the Roman Catholic Church, the head of that Roman Empire, the Pope was arrested. The head is taken down. So there's a deadly wound. But it was healed. And they were like, well, who can make war? We took out the head of this beast and it's back. Exactly what the Bible says. Who can make war? And an interesting thing is, we get into the 7 kings. 5 have fallen. One is yet to come and continue a short space. And then there's an 8th who is of the 7. This is where things get interesting. The Pope was officially made a king, or recognized as a king, always been the king, took over as the Emperor of Rome, but was actually recognized as a king in 1929. 1929. So I'm going to put these links in the info box along with a video that I'm going to share. It's important to this. It's actually from a Catholic. I'm going to say a hardcore Catholic. And I think he was shown some things. It's very important. And the interesting thing that I'm going to share with you right now before I continue is that there's a lot of bullshit in every church. The Catholics, the Orthodox, all the Protestants, Baptists, Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, Jehovah's Witness, Methodists, Presbyterian, Lutherans. There's too many to name. Those are just ones that are coming into my head. There's all kinds of messed up stuff there. And it could be more of them have more bullshit than truth. But there's still some truth. And a lot of this information you can get from listening to the different sects. That's what I do. I'll listen to people if they're Baptist. Not so much if they're Mormons, and not so much if they're Jehovah's Witnesses, not so much if they're Catholic. But I will listen to them a bit and see what they got to say when they're speaking from the Bible. And I'll listen to Seventh-day Adventists, as long as they're not reading Ellen G. White, they're reading from the Bible. And like I said, Presbyterians, even Calvinists. I'll hear everybody out because I like to learn. I want to know what the truth is. Jesus is the truth, the way, and the life. Jesus is the truth. God is truth. I want to know God. I want to know truth. So I look for it. And there's great truth in a lot of these denominations. That's how these denominations started. They found a truth and they clung to it, and others didn't want to, so they ended up separating and creating a new group. So it's like the truth of God was divided up in all kinds of different sects. And some of them just have a little bit of truth. Some of them have a big chunk of it. And some of them seem to have like none at all. But I still will hear them out just to see. But the point I'm making here is that like the Seventh-day Adventists have a good grasp of the Pope being the Antichrist and a lot of this prophecy that led to the start of the Roman papacy and the uprooting of the 3 kings and the deadly head wound by Napoleon. And then this Catholic guy is going to show about how the eighth king, because you may be putting it all together in your head right now. So let's just slow down a little bit here and hear me out, because one of the videos, I don't agree with Catholicism, but I think this guy is actually onto something. I'm not going to show the video here. I'm going to put it in the info. So if you want to check it out, I think it's like an 8-9 minute video. And he gets into these 7 kings and the 8th. But anyway, I'll give a little more detail as I go through this. This is just a little quick picture of it. When the first king was established in 1929, from the point of the Bible, they were looking at here. They said 5 have fallen, 1 was Pope John Paul. One's to come and continue a short time, where he didn't finish out. He had to resign. And then there's an 8th who's of the 7. And you're going to be saying, okay, he's the 8th, but he's not of the 7. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. I was like, you're right. You're right. And I know you can't see this, so that's why I wanted to go over here. So we got, Pius the 11th, Pius the 12th, John the 23rd, Paul the 6th, John Paul I, John Paul II, Benedict the 16th, and then just Francis. And you'd be going, okay, he's the 8th, but he's not of the 7. You are right. And that's why you need to watch the video. Because this guy is showing how all of these guys are the kings of, I guess, the papacy, the Vatican. But he was never actually ordained as a priest, and he's not actually set up as the king. So this guy is kind of just a seat warmer. He's not officially one of them. So what we could see is that a pope is going to come up that is either one of these guys raised from the dead, probably John Paul II. I think he was the most popular one. Or it's going to be, I don't know, some fucking guy, some Maitreya-like guy who's doing some miracle stuff. But I think being raised from the dead is going to be a huge, huge turning point where everybody's going to turn to the Catholic Church, they're going to turn to the Pope, and they're going to be deceived, and it's going to open up a lot of Christians' eyes to what I'm saying here. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's somebody like John Paul. But anyway, I think that about sums it up. I think I got into every little detail. The papacy is that beast, and America is the second beast that's starting to pay homage and build an image to this first beast. So anyway, it did start off as a Christian nation, started off like a lamb. Because I know a lot of people like, America is the new Israel. Yes. But ancient Israel is to show us what is going to happen to us, right? We can learn from the past because it's repeating itself. Everything that was written about Israel was to help us understand what is going to happen to us, right? I'm just going to go to images to give you something to look at here. So, what happened to Israel? Let's go up to the end times, because I know a lot of you are really gung-ho, pro-American, patriot, want to defend your country, want us to be free, and that is all good. That is all good, except you're putting the country up as an idol. You're putting it up as your God. And you don't realize it. So please hear me out here. What happened to ancient Israel? They thought they were blessed because they had the temple of God, and they became zealots, fighting for the country and wanting to be set free from the Romans. Right? around the time Jesus came. And they were hoping Jesus was going to be king and set them free from the Romans and establish Israel and set up the freedom. And a lot of these Christians that I'm listening to basically think the same thing, that we're going to overthrow uh, all this bullshit that's come in. People are admitting that the United States of America is a corporation, and they're talking about it being dissolved and all this stuff. And people are going to get arrested and all this. But what happened to Israel? They kept wanting their freedom, but then they ended up getting surrounded by Rome. But at that time, I think like the emperor died or something like that, and there was like a 6-month period. And Jesus warned them, when you see them surround Jerusalem, you need to head for the hills. So all the Christians left Jerusalem because the soldiers weren't stopping them, because they had no orders to do anything other than surround Jerusalem. So they were just letting people come and go for about 6 months, and all the Christians got out of there. And no Christian died during the siege when Rome ended up destroying Jerusalem and destroying the temple. But I think it was over a million Jews died. A lot of them died just during the siege when they were holding them out. They didn't even attack yet because they started eating their own children and everything. But yeah, so if that's happened to Israel, what do you think is going to happen to America? More and more people are going to become zealots, wanting to be free, not realizing that they are under Roman rule. They don't even realize that the Romans have their law set up. They have a little city-state, the Washington, D.C., that runs and is dictating what's what in America, and that we agreed to it by contract, and we're using their money and everything. We don't even realize it, and we want our freedom, and they're like, no, you're under our rule. You have us as your God. Our state that we have set up is your idol, is your God. You don't even realize it, and you keep fighting it. And I think what would happen is the UN is actually going to surround us. But something's going to happen to give us time as Christians to get to the wilderness, to get out and let everything be destroyed. There's judgment upon Israel. Israel thought they were fine, they were in God's favor. Christians today, same thing. God's not going to let that happen to us. We're in God's favor. And then judgment's coming. A lot of people are going to get destroyed. And I just wish I could get this out to more people. So if you're hearing this, you're convicted, share it. Share it with your Christian friends, share it with your Catholic friends. Heck, if you started with the first video I made here about the prophecy, you might be able to even reach non-believers. But anyway, that is that. Thanks for watching and take care.